While you're worried about rising grocery prices, there's a far more terrifying reality approaching. Entire food categories could completely disappear from store shelves, sometimes for months or even years. I'm not talking about temporary shortages or regional disruptions. I'm talking about the complete collapse of food systems that we've relied on for decades. In this video, I'll reveal the 30 everyday foods that are most at risk of vanishing, explain the hidden vulnerabilities threatening our food supply, and give you actionable strategies to protect yourself and your family from the next major food crisis. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the foods in your pantry right now might be worth more than gold in the coming years. Welcome to Prepper Pantry, where we help you build resilience against an uncertain future. If you find this information valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe for more essential preparedness content. Section 1. The foundation foods in crisis. Let's start with the foods that form the absolute foundation of human civilization. These aren't luxury items or specialty products. These are the staples that keep billions of people alive every single day, and they're all in serious trouble. First up is wheat, the backbone of global diets. This grain is in your bread, your pasta, your pizza, and even your beer. Wheat accounts for 18% of the world's entire caloric intake, making it one of the most critical foods on the planet. But here's what's happening. Global wheat production is forecast to decline by 1.1% below 2023 levels. That might sound small, but when you're talking about feeding 8 billion people, even tiny drops create massive problems. Ukraine, once called the breadbasket of Europe, has seen its wheat fields devastated by war, disrupting a third of the world's wheat market. Meanwhile, droughts and frosts in key lions from India to the U.S. Midwest are hammering yields. When wheat becomes scarce, it's not just bread that disappears, it's hundreds of products that depend on this single grain. But wheat isn't the only grain in crisis. Rice is the survival food for billions, making up 19% of global caloric intake. Yet production is absolutely plummeting in top-producing countries. Bangladesh is down 15%. Indonesia, down 12%. India, the world's largest rice exporter, is considering export bans that could slash global rice exports by 54% by 2050. When rice becomes scarce, it's not just a price hike. It's a humanitarian crisis that affects more people than almost any other food shortage. Then there's corn. And this one is particularly insidious because corn is absolutely everywhere. It's in your soda as high-fructose corn syrup, in your ice cream as cornstarch, in your meat as animal feed, and even in your car as ethanol. The U.S. Midwest produces 61% of American corn, but this region is increasingly vulnerable to extreme weather. A single drought or infrastructure attack could wipe out half the country's supply. With climate patterns like La Niña predicted to bring more floods and droughts, the domino effect on both food and fuel is terrifying. Soybeans complete this picture of grain vulnerability. These aren't just for tofu and soy sauce, they're a key ingredient in processed foods and animal feed. 8 countries have already imposed export restrictions on soybeans, and China is stockpiling them, driving prices through the roof. Brazil and Argentina, major producers, are battling extreme weather. Global soybean production could fall by up to 35% by 2050, threatening the very fabric of our food system. Now let's talk about protein, because the meat industry has vulnerabilities that most people never consider. In 2021, a cyber attack on JBS, the world's largest meat packer, exposed just how fragile our centralized food systems really are. A few companies control most of the beef supply, and their lack of cybersecurity could lead to weeks of empty meat cases if they're targeted again. The beef industry learned nothing from this attack and remains just as vulnerable today. Chicken processing is even more centralized and fragile. These massive processing plants operate on razor-thin margins with no backup systems. Labor shortages and plant shutdowns can make chicken disappear from shelves overnight, with no easy way to ramp up production elsewhere. When one plant goes down, entire regions lose their primary protein source. And then there are eggs. The egg shortage of 2022, driven by bird flu, was a warning that nobody heeded. Massive centralized farms mean one outbreak can wipe out millions of chickens in a matter of days. The industry has made virtually no changes to prevent another crisis, leaving us completely vulnerable to another protein disaster. But it's not just animal proteins at risk. The oils and sweeteners that form the foundation of processed foods are equally vulnerable. Vegetable oils like sunflower, palm, and soybean oils are in nearly every processed food you eat. Export restrictions and war, particularly in Ukraine, have already disrupted global supply. When these oils vanish, so do countless everyday foods that depend on them. Sugar is another hidden vulnerability. It's not just in desserts. Sugar is in everything from bread, ketchup, to pasta sauce. Most sugar comes from just a few regions: Brazil, India, and Thailand. These areas are now facing droughts, floods, and hurricanes with increasing frequency. When disasters strike these regions, it's not just desserts that disappear from shelves, but hundreds of processed foods that rely on sugar as a preservative and flavor enhancer. Section 2. Luxury foods becoming actual luxuries. Now let's move to foods that we consider everyday treats, but are rapidly pricing themselves out of reach for ordinary families. These are the foods that make life enjoyable, but they're becoming luxuries that only the wealthy can afford. Your morning coffee ritual is under serious threat. Coffee plants are incredibly sensitive to temperature changes, and climate chaos is making traditional growing regions completely unsuitable for cultivation. Most coffee comes from a handful of countries, which means a single drought or hurricane could send prices skyrocketing overnight. The next supply shock could make your morning cup cost more than your car payment. Tea is facing a similar crisis. India's tea production fell nearly 8% in 2024, with key regions like Assam suffering from rising temperatures and declining rainfall. By 2050, optimal tea growing conditions in Kenya, Sri Lanka, and China will shrink dramatically. Your morning cup of tea is genuinely at risk of becoming a luxury item. But nothing illustrates this luxury problem better than chocolate. Cocoa prices have soared to $12,000 per metric ton, representing a 300% increase in 2024. Disease is ravaging West African plantations, and since 96.5% of Europe's cocoa comes from these regions, chocolate is rapidly becoming a luxury item. Companies are shrinking portion sizes, raising prices, and even changing recipes to use less cocoa. The chocolate you love may soon be unrecognizable or completely unaffordable. Fresh produce is becoming equally problematic. Bananas might seem abundant, but almost all commercial bananas are the Cavendish variety, grown in just a few countries. This monoculture is highly susceptible to disease, hurricanes, and political instability. A single crisis could wipe out bananas for months, and there's no backup variety ready to replace them. Avocados have become a symbol of millennial excess, but they're actually incredibly water-intensive and grown in climate-vulnerable regions. Droughts and competition from the beauty industry, which uses avocado oil in skincare products, are squeezing supply from both ends. The days of affordable avocado toast may genuinely be numbered. Citrus fruits are facing their own perfect storm. Florida's orange groves are being battered by increasingly severe hurricanes, while California's lemon and lime farms face severe drought conditions. Here's the critical problem. Citrus trees take years to mature, so recovery from disasters is extremely slow. When citrus crops fail, you're looking at years of shortages, not months. Mediterranean staples are becoming casualties of climate change. Olive oil has already turned into liquid gold due to Mediterranean droughts, with prices spiraling completely out of control. Climate scientists warn this isn't a one-off event. It's the new normal. Some restaurants are already switching to cheaper oils, and home cooks may soon find real olive oil completely out of reach. Tomatoes present a different kind of vulnerability. They're 95% water and require precise temperature control during transport. With supply chains stretched thin and fuel costs rising, even minor disruptions can turn tons of tomatoes into waste before they reach consumers. The result is scarcity and higher prices for everything from pasta sauce to pizza. Leafy greens like lettuce have a shelf life measured in days, not weeks. They're grown in climate-sensitive regions like California and Arizona, where labor shortages and disease outbreaks can wipe out entire crops. E. coli contamination can shut down entire growing regions for weeks, making fresh greens a rare luxury during outbreaks. Section 3. The hidden dependencies and supply chain domino effects. Now we get to the really scary part. The hidden dependencies and single points of failure that could bring down entire food categories overnight. These are the vulnerabilities that most people never think about, but they're the ones that could cause the most devastating shortages. Let's start with what I call the pollinator apocalypse. Honeybee colonies in the U.S. could decline by up to 70% in 2025 due to disease, mites, and pesticides. Here's why this matters. 35% of the world's food production depends on pollinators. We're not just talking about honey disappearing, we're talking about almonds, apples, cucumbers, and even coffee. When the bees die, entire categories of food become impossible to produce. California produces 82% of the world's almonds, but drought and water scarcity are making this production completely unsustainable. The nut industry's rapid expansion during drought years was a gamble that's starting to backfire spectacularly. Walnut and pistachio crops are also declining, and there's no replacement region ready to take over production. Vanilla provides a perfect example of single-source vulnerability. Madagascar produces up to 85% of the world's vanilla, but cyclones and poverty are slashing harvests year after year. Vanilla orchids take years to mature and require hand pollination. You can't just move production to another country. A single storm can wipe out years of production, making vanilla even more expensive than it already is. The spice trade faces similar vulnerabilities. Most spices come from specific regions with unique climates that can't be replicated elsewhere. Disruptions from weather, disease, or political instability can make your favorite flavors vanish overnight. There's no backup plan for most spices. When the source region fails, the spice disappears globally. But some of the most shocking vulnerabilities are in basic processed foods. The UK relies on a single quarry in France for the calcium carbonate used in fortified flour. When protests or disruptions hit that quarry, flour can vanish from British shelves overnight. This kind of single-source dependency is hidden throughout the food system, creating vulnerabilities that most people never imagine. Baby formula represents perhaps the ultimate vulnerability. It's incredibly complex to manufacture, requiring ingredients from around the world and strict safety standards. When a single factory shuts down or an ingredient becomes unavailable, shelves go empty and parents panic. With ingredients increasingly sourced from unstable regions, the risk of another formula crisis is extremely high. Steel tariffs have created an unexpected vulnerability in canned goods. Tariffs have doubled steel costs, raising the price of cans by up to 30 cents each. Smaller manufacturers are already dropping out of the market, and specialty canned items are disappearing from shelves. As costs continue to rise, expect more shortages in canned foods. Frozen foods face their own unique vulnerabilities. They require constant refrigeration, making them incredibly vulnerable to energy price spikes and grid failures. During heat waves, grocery stores have had to throw out entire frozen sections due to power outages. As energy costs rise and grid stability decreases, frozen foods may become a rare treat rather than a convenient staple. Even pasta, the ultimate comfort food, is under threat. It's made from wheat, and with wheat production falling and energy costs rising, manufacturers are rationing products and switching to lower quality ingredients. The days of cheap, reliable pasta may genuinely be ending. Conclusion. So why is all of this happening? We're facing what experts call a perfect storm of vulnerabilities. Climate change is no longer a distant worry. It's wreaking havoc right now. La Niña weather patterns are expected to dominate through early 2025, bringing droughts, floods, and crop failures worldwide. Key agricultural regions are experiencing the worst growing conditions in decades. At the same time, countries are weaponizing food, imposing export bans on everything from wheat to vegetable oils. When nations hoard supplies during crises, global markets spiral, and shortages spread rapidly across borders. Our modern supply chains are stretched impossibly thin, with food traveling thousands of kilometers and relying on just-in-time delivery systems. Single-point failures, one factory, one port, one country, can bring entire categories of food to a complete halt. But here's what you can do about it. First, diversify your pantry. Don't rely on a single staple food. Stock up on non-perishables with long shelf lives. Rice, dried beans, canned goods, and pasta, while they're still affordable and available. Support local producers whenever possible. Local farmers and food producers are far less vulnerable to global supply chain shocks. Build relationships with local food sources. They may be your lifeline during the next crisis. Stay informed about supply chains, weather patterns, and trade policies. The more you know about what's coming, the better you can prepare and adapt your food storage strategy. Most importantly, avoid waste and plan ahead. Use what you have efficiently, rotate your pantry stock, and plan meals to minimize waste. Being prepared doesn't mean hoarding, it means being smart, flexible, and ready for disruption. The foods we rely on every day are hanging by a thread. The next supply chain crisis could make staples disappear overnight, but knowledge is power. By understanding these risks and taking practical steps now, you can protect yourself and your family from the worst effects of food shortages. Preparation, not panic, is the key to weathering the coming storm. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and start building your resilience today. If this video opened your eyes to the vulnerabilities in our food system, please like and subscribe to Prepper Pantry for more essential preparedness content. Your future self will thank you for taking action now.